The situation involving Claressa Shields, Remy Ma, and Papoose has become one of the most talked about entanglements in celebrity relationship discourse, and the story continues to evolve in a way that reveals just how complicated love, loyalty, image, and public perception can become once social media is involved. For months, Claressa Shields publicly celebrated Papoose as if she had unlocked some secret relationship cheat code, describing him as a source of support, growth, and happiness in a world where genuine partnership is often difficult to find. She wanted the world to see her win not just in the ring, but in her personal life. However, the tone of that celebration has taken a dramatic turn. Recently, Clarissa has been online expressing frustration and disappointment, implying that Papoose misled her, used her for money and visibility, and ultimately betrayed her trust. This sudden reversal has left many observers wondering if Clarissa truly did not recognize the warning signs, or if the shift in narrative represents a strategic attempt to reposition herself as a victim now that the public tide is turning and the optics are no longer in her favor. Part of what makes the situation so messy is the legal and emotional context surrounding it. While Clarissa was loudly and publicly attached to Papoose, one critical detail never changed. Remy Ma and Papoose are still legally married. Despite month after month of Clarissa referring to herself as the woman in his life, the reality is that Papoose was never actually freed from the marriage he had built and maintained for years with Remy Ma. That fact alone raised eyebrows and created persistent questions about whether Clarissa had inserted herself into the dynamics of a marriage that was complicated, strained, or simply not officially over. Regardless of how emotionally distant a marriage may be, being legally bound carries weight that social media declarations cannot override. And though Clarissa repeatedly attempted to assert that Remy was simply jealous, bitter, or unwilling to move on, the entire situation never seemed as clean as she wanted it to appear. This became even more evident when Remy Ma, who has a long history of responding directly to disrespect, did not clap back at Clarissa the way many expected. When Clarissa and Papoose first began appearing everywhere together, flaunting affection and projecting a united front, the blogosphere collectively braced for Remy's response. Fans assumed she would post something, expose text messages, jump on live, or at the very least throw a subliminal shot to reclaim some power. Instead, she said absolutely nothing. That silence was not only surprising, it was strategic. Silence in a public conflict is powerful because it forces the other party to talk louder, harder, and more frequently in order to manufacture a win. And that is exactly what appeared to happen with Clarissa. While Remy Ma continued living her life, handling her business, and making public appearances without addressing the situation at all, Clarissa was online almost every other week making declarations about her relationship, defending it, and indirectly comparing herself to Remy in ways that made it clear she needed validation from the public. Even in interviews, Clarissa inserted herself into Papoose's narrative in ways that felt intense and territorial. When Papoose appeared on The Breakfast Club to promote his project, Clarissa tagged along simply to support, but once the hosts respectfully brought up Remy Ma, Clarissa immediately got on mic, pulled a chair into the frame, and inserted herself in the discussion as if she had equal ownership of his history. She began speaking on the timeline of his relationship with Remy Ma, the separation, how long they had been apart, and attempted to paint the situation as old news. But the more she tried to rewrite that story, the more uncomfortable Papoose looked. His body language shifted, his tone became more reserved. It was as if he recognized how messy the optics were becoming and how deeply Clarissa was entangling herself in matters she may not have fully understood. Body language rarely lies, and anyone watching closely could see he did not fully co-sign the way she was dominating the narrative. The tension did not truly explode until the holiday season. This was the moment that tested the claims, the optics, and the narrative that Clarissa had been selling for months. Around Christmas, Remy Ma was seen out shopping and looking remarkably good, glowing, youthful, and seemingly unbothered by anything happening online. Comment sections filled up immediately with praise for her looks, her energy, and the fact that she did not appear to be stressed over a situation that, according to Clarissa, she was supposed to be jealous of. Shortly after that, Clarissa surfaced as well, showing off her own figure and confidence as if positioning herself for the same comparisons. That timing only intensified the conversation and made it clear that whether intentional or not, the two women were being contrasted in real time.
But here's where things truly shifted. When Christmas came, Papoose did not spend it with Clarissa. Instead, he spent it with his daughter and his wife. And for many people watching, that was the undeniable turning point. Major holidays tend to expose the true hierarchy of relationships. A man can play boyfriend online, he can flirt on social media, he can go to events, he can show up for date nights, but holidays reveal who has priority, who has history, and who still holds emotional and domestic real estate. When Christmas arrived, Clarissa attempted to act as though everything was fine, jumping on live in front of a Christmas tree to show she was doing well. But the internet noticed immediately that the man she had been loudly bragging about and defending all year was absent, and not just absent, but present somewhere else with his wife. What made matters worse was that Papoose did not publicly acknowledge Clarissa during the holiday at all. There was no post, no story, no message, no gift reveal, nothing that indicated she was part of his Christmas reality. Clarissa attempted to respond by saying he didn't spend Christmas with Remy either, and claimed he was instead with his mother and his family. However, she slipped in referring to Remy as the ex-wife, and the internet instantly corrected her because there was no legal divorce and no paperwork to support that version of events. In fact, the legal reality directly contradicted Clarissa's attempts to reshake the narrative. That single moment exposed just how fragile her position in the situation actually was, and how much of her public defense relied on perception rather than facts. Then came the gift situation. In an attempt to re-establish her position, Clarissa went online showing expensive luxury items and implying that Papoose had gifted them to her for Christmas. However, internet detectives quickly recognized that these were the same items she had posted buying for herself days earlier. Suddenly, the story shifted from "look what my man bought me" to "look what I'm pretending my man bought me," which completely changed public perception. At that point, the internet began leading the narrative instead of Clarissa. People began accusing Papoose of using Clarissa financially, leveraging her career, her income, and her public presence while still emotionally orbiting Remy Ma. Fans argued that Clarissa was never chosen, she was simply useful, and once that interpretation took hold, it spread rapidly and became difficult for Clarissa to reverse. In the aftermath, rumors began circulating that Clarissa was now telling people that Papoose had played her, misled her, and used her affection to his advantage. She reportedly expressed that if she had known he was still emotionally tied to Remy, she never would have involved herself in the relationship at all. Whether those claims are sincere or strategic cannot be proven, but the shift in messaging is undeniable. The woman who once loudly proclaimed that Papoose was the greatest thing to ever happen to her was now positioning herself as someone who had been blindsided by manipulation and deceit, and that raises a larger question about the entire situation. Was Clarissa genuinely unaware of what she was stepping into, or did she believe that public validation and loud declarations would force Papoose into choosing her in the long run? However, from the outside, it once appeared to be a dreamlike situation for Clarissa. She described Papoose as a life upgrade, a cheat code, a shortcut to the soft life she believed she had earned but never experienced. In her public view, he was the partner who finally cared for her, uplifted her, and cherished her. Yet today, that same relationship is showing signs of having been built more on performance than permanence, more on projection than partnership, and more on desire than actual compatibility. Clarissa is now expressing pain and betrayal, alleging that Papoose not only turned his back on her, but used her financially while continuing to navigate unresolved business with his legal wife, Remy Ma. The irony here is that the ending, as dramatic as it has been, was not unpredictable. The signs were visible to anyone willing to look beyond aesthetics and captions. The most glaring of those signs was that Remy Ma and Papoose never stopped being legally married. While the public was meant to believe that Clarissa was stepping into the role of a new partner, the truth was that she was doing so while the previous chapter had never officially ended. And when a relationship begins in the gray areas of emotional or legal ambiguity, the stability of that bond becomes fragile before it truly begins. Nevertheless, for months, Clarissa embraced the spotlight that came with being next to Papoose. She was everywhere that he was, proudly positioned at his side. Their presence together at events became a spectacle, a carefully curated visual that implied closeness, support, and a kind of devotion that felt convincing enough, at least to those who didn't examine it too deeply.
Yet, even during their strongest public moments, Remy Ma's presence lingered. When Remy exposed messages insinuating that Papoose was not financially supporting Clarissa in the way Clarissa implied, it forced a crack in the image being projected. But instead of reevaluating the situation, Clarissa doubled down, insisting that Remy's behavior stemmed from jealousy, not truth. She argued that Remy was angry because she believed Clarissa was now receiving the affection she never did. Those claims added fuel to an already volatile situation and transformed what should have been private emotional sorting into a battle for public validation. That validation became even more important as time went on. What was once a lighthearted romantic storyline evolved into a tense triangle filled with subtle digs, internet spectators, and shifting narratives. Clarissa, who had been celebrated as a world-class athlete and winner of numerous championships, was becoming better known for her entanglement with Remy Ma and Papoose than for her achievements. Whether intentional or accidental, Papoose became the bridge through which Clarissa entered a new kind of fame, one rooted in gossip, not glory. And for someone accustomed to being admired for physical dominance, discipline, and talent, it was a disorienting shift. This shift became visibly obvious during Papoose's appearance on The Breakfast Club, an interview originally intended to spotlight his work and recent projects. Clarissa accompanied him, presumably in support, but once Remy Ma's name entered the discussion, the tone changed. Viewers watched as Clarissa inserted herself directly into the conversation, positioning herself not as a spectator, but as an involved party who believed she had the right and authority to speak. Her smile faded into sharpness, and her commentary took on a protective, almost possessive edge. The interview morphed from an artist discussing his work into a subtle declaration of romantic territory. Meanwhile, Papoose's body language contradicted hers entirely. He appeared uncomfortable, cautious, even restrained, as though attempting to manage a situation spiraling faster than he could respond. Whether intentional or not, the imbalance between Clarissa's forwardness and Papoose's hesitation painted a picture that would later feel prophetic. The interview was not just a tense moment, it was a preview of a dynamic that would play out over the following weeks, Clarissa attempting to solidify a narrative and Papoose quietly backing away from it. Things escalated further during the holiday season, a time of year that exposes relational truths more effectively than any camera ever could. When Remy Ma was seen out Christmas shopping looking radiant, confident, and unbothered, social media lit up with praise, jokes, and speculation. Viewers noted how youthful she appeared, how poised, how distinctly unaffected she seemed by all the chaos swirling online. Shortly after, Clarissa emerged publicly as well, styled and polished, but the undertone felt noticeably different. Whereas Remy's appearance was effortless, Clarissa's felt reactive, not because she didn't look beautiful, but because the timing made the intention obvious. What made the situation even more compelling was Remy's refusal to engage. She offered no commentary, no shade, no cryptic posts, no interviews. Silence became her weapon. And silence in the era of the internet is often more powerful than any clapback could ever be. It allowed Remy's louder reactions to echo unopposed, making the contrast between them more striking. Clarissa posted videos, receipts, designer bags, and declarations of independence, emphasizing that she did not need a man to provide for her. The message was strong, but the subtext was louder. Someone had questioned whether she was being provided for, and she felt compelled to respond. The real turning point, however, came with the revelation that Papoose did not spend Christmas with Clarissa. Instead, he was with his wife and daughter, a detail that did not require explanation, commentary, or publicity. The holidays are about emotional choice. When someone chooses to spend them with a spouse and child rather than a romantic partner, that communicates priority more clearly than any statement ever could. Clarissa's response was immediate and defensive. She live-streamed from her decorated home, attempting to project happiness and stability while downplaying the glaring absence in the room. She then addressed the situation by saying that Papoose didn't spend Christmas with Remy either, describing her as an ex-wife and claiming he was with his mother. This explanation did not land the way she hoped. Referring to Remy as an ex-wife was not only inaccurate, but strategically misleading. Audiences quickly fact-checked the claim and reminded Clarissa of a detail she could not rewrite. Remy and Papoose are still legally married, and legal bonds carry symbolic weight, especially when emotional bonds appear to remain intact. Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, these holidays reveal who someone considers family. Clarissa's live streams and posts felt like someone trying to fill a void rather than someone enjoying an authentic celebration. The internet then began playing detective, as it often does. Users rewatched Remy's shopping video and noticed a male voice in the background that sounded strikingly like Papoose. That discovery, whether accurate or not, became the spark that ignited widespread speculation that Papoose was not only spending the holiday season with Remy, but financially supporting her during it. Suddenly, conversations shifted from romance to resources. Money changed the emotional climate of the narrative. If he was allegedly paying for Remy's purchases while Clarissa was at home defending her independence, that reframed the dynamic entirely. It suggested emotional loyalty in one direction and practical investment in another. Things became even more complicated once Clarissa tried to counter the claims by showcasing luxury gifts she said Papoose bought for her. But eagle-eyed viewers noticed that these items were the same pieces she had posted days earlier, describing them as purchases she made for herself. Once that contradiction surfaced, the storyline transformed from heartbreak to embarrassment. It was no longer about whether Clarissa was in love. It was about whether she was trying to prove she was being chosen when reality suggested otherwise. At this point, Clarissa began telling those close to her, and eventually the public, that Papoose misled her, that she didn't know he was still emotionally connected to Remy, and that she never would have entertained him had she known. The narrative shifted from triumph to victimhood. But audiences were not quick to embrace that viewpoint. Many argued that Clarissa was not misled but overconfident, that instead of approaching the situation with caution, she approached it like a competition she believed she had already won. The compliments to Remy prior to courting Papoose, the eagerness to show off, the direct comparisons, and the shift from admiration to rivalry all painted a picture that felt intentional, not accidental. This perception mattered because it shaped public sympathy. It determined whether people saw Clarissa as blindsided or as someone who knowingly pursued a situation that was never fully available. The narrative now being told online is that Clarissa may have mistaken attention for affection and proximity for partnership. For some observers, the saddest part of the situation was not the scandal itself, but the realization that Clarissa may never have experienced a healthy romantic bond. Because when someone has never felt emotionally safe in love, they often confuse chaos for passion and validation for intimacy. They accept fragments of commitments and call it devotion. They chase presenters instead of partners and settle for being an option instead of a priority. And this is where the story has unexpectedly shifted from gossip to commentary on self-worth. Viewers are now asking why Clarissa felt she needed to prove she was the prize, instead of simply being treated like one. They are questioning why she was willing to fight so loudly for a man who never fought publicly for her. And they are wondering when she will recognize that real love does not require visibility, nor competition, nor theatrics. It requires consistency. It requires clarity. It requires someone who chooses you in front of everyone, not behind closed doors, not during in-between moments, and certainly not only when it benefits them. Because history shows that men rarely choose the woman who fights the hardest for the relationship publicly. They tend to choose the woman they already built a life with quietly. And in this case, the silence came from Remy, not Clarissa. Silence is powerful. Silence is strategic. Silence shows confidence. Remy never tried to prove she was chosen, and she never tried to prove a man was hers. Clarissa did, and the contrast could not be more glaring. Now the story appears to be nearing its conclusion. The energy has changed, the tone has shifted, and even Clarissa's public messaging suggests the dynamic is collapsing faster than expected. Whether the breakup becomes official, whether Papoose returns to Remy,